It was a little bit later on when I actually really got to understand generative art. Because I was seeing these autoglyphs at a 3 floor and just thinking like, what is this QR code? Like this thing doesn't make sense to me at all. Um, and then finally taking the time to learn about generative art and the beauty in code and how that can be expressed artistically. I was like, oh wow, that was like the mind blowing moment.
The SquiggleDAO podcast is brought to you by Niftyfi. If you need liquidity, instead of selling your NFT, you can get a loan. Niftyfi is the most battle-tested and secure NFT lending protocol. You can borrow ETH, USDC, or DAI from lenders using your NFTs as collateral in a trustless peer-to-peer fashion. By being peer-to-peer, you can get better terms on specific or rare NFTs. And there is no liquidation risk. As long as you repay the loan before maturity, your NFT is yours. Head over to niftyfi.com and access the app today.
Welcome to the SquiggleDAO podcast. My name is Jared, and online you can find me on X at Jared_pause. I'm the founder of the 8NAP Digital Asset Fund and the art forward platform 8NAP Art. And I am a Chromie Squiggle optimist at this moment.
And I'm Nifty. I lead finance, acquisitions, and NFT DeFi for the DAO, and I'm another Squiggle optimist. Our guest today is Danny Seedphrase. Seedphrase is a leading collector, investor, and entrepreneur. He's also a DJ and the owner of iconic pieces such as an Autoglyph Full Set, including the Bear Glyph, and the only 7-attribute CryptoPunk. It's an honor to have him with us today. Danny, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we cannot start with anything else than your incredible crypto journey. You invested, if we are correct, you invested $4,000 in Bitcoin in 2013, and you ran it to more than 9 figures, more than $100 million without round tripping it, which is key mentioning it. So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you discover Bitcoin at the time? How was the landscape then? And what did you do afterwards?
Yeah, look, like at the time I was studying psychology at university. And like any other university student, I was a big procrastinator. And there was a crisis in Cyprus at the time on the BBC. And basically what happened was I was, one day, scrolling the BBC, I read about, this like Bitcoin cryptocurrency that had just risen from $10 to like $30. And it really intrigued me. And I really started to like, really like dig in. I really went down that rabbit hole. Learned about, the importance of like being your own bank, having full control over your money. And yeah, like I really, genuinely fell in love with it and fell in love with that early community as well. Like not a lot of people know, but, this really started, it wasn't on Discord, it wasn't on Telegram. It wasn't on Slack or anywhere. It was on bitcointalk.org. That's where pretty much, all of these early, Bitcoin OGs, came together. And, initially it was just Bitcoin primarily. And then, we started to really see like, the altcoins, grow out as well. And there was like our own like separate altcoin section. And I was just like, super impressed with the innovation in the space. We started with proof of work blockchains and, moving to proof of stake, then to smart contracts as well. And, I basically just saw it as like, a means to potentially get out of university, not do a 9-to-5 job. I was thinking, if this is my lottery ticket, I would rather, take this than, to finish my studies and to become a psychologist or even a lawyer, which is what I ended up studying for afterwards.
That's crazy. And so you were mentioning altcoins. So you were doing some of those altcoins bets as well?
Yeah, it was. So like that's actually what got me interested. I think like that's like everyone's story even today. Like not many people just go straight into Bitcoin. I was looking at Litecoin. I think it was around 20 cents at the time, and it was on BTCE, which is like a now long defunct exchange. And I was so addicted to the volatility. Like watching Litecoin one day being 20 cents to suddenly 50 cents the next day, and then a week later it was $1. And I even tried my hand at like mining. I had a big mining kit ready to go on Litecoin. My mom had no idea what was going on. She put it into the garage and didn't tell her. And there's all this like heat and noise like coming through our floorboards. So that didn't last very long at all. I probably should just put that money straight into the actual Litecoin itself. but yeah, like I just really enjoyed the alt scene. The early exchanges like Poloniex, Cryptsy, the communities that were getting like built around them as well. At the time, I was still a little bit naive, like thinking, this is going to be like the next Bitcoin, for example. Little did I know, like most of these altcoins just end up being pump and dumps just to increase your Bitcoin, and that was the idea back in the day, right? It was to increase your Bitcoin holdings. These days, it's a little bit more muddled. Some people want to increase their Solana, some people want to increase their Ethereum. But back then, it was all altcoin to Bitcoin pairs, so everyone was just trading in and out of Bitcoin basically. And yeah, I'm a very competitive person, and I had a few friends getting into it as well at the same time, and I think that's what really like drove me to explore all like the trading world as well. Like this support, the resistance, MACDs, RSIs. You would have like trading competitions to see who could increase our Bitcoin the most each week.
That's super cool. And you made your initial big figure money on the run up on 2017?
Correct. So the one coin that I really bet heavy on was Ripple. Like we had a lot of like Bitcoin based coins, like one coins that were like just based off the code base of Bitcoin, like forks, I guess you would call them. So like they weren't truly innovative. We had Peer Coin and these like greener coins and things like that. But the one coin that really stood out to me was Ripple. They were really trying to tackle a serious problem. At the time, most people had to use Western Union. It was slow, burdensome. It cost a lot of money. And they were really trying to solve a real world issue, which is what I loved. Fast, instant, cheap payments. And I really got to know the team who was there very early on, and became a big believer in what they did. And I just found even like their wallet experience and everything was so professional. It was like the first sort of like altcoin that actually had like a proper corporate team behind it. It wasn't just some guy in his basement just like releasing some Bitcoin clone. So yeah, I went really big on Ripple. I basically, instead of stacking Bitcoin, I was stacking Ripple, and I was buying it at, I think it was half a cent or something, maybe even less. Um, and no expectations at all. Like I was just stoked to maybe make $100,000, $200,000. So really, like to my surprise, in 2017, I think the high on Ripple was it was around $3. I think it went really high. And it basically changed my life. So I started in psychology. I graduated in psychology, and then I moved to into law school. And I was halfway through my law degree when this happened. And that was the moment when I was like, look, I can walk away from this and have a safety net. I can actually pursue something that I love and enjoy, and not have to worry about failing, basically.
How important do you think the psychology degree was in potentially helping you navigate this space? Because markets are psychological, right?
Definitely.
And,
Yeah.
and then your analytical and the legal brain or structure that you maybe naturally have a tendency towards. I'm curious to kind of pull at that thread a little bit.
Yeah, of course. It definitely helps spotting narratives. Like, human, I really enjoy like human behavior psychology. And what pulls like people's like, like strings, right? Like what makes someone, want to buy something or want to sell something. And I think very early on, I identified, a lot of these like narratives very early, and I would just like play into that basically. Like I was thinking like if I am someone who's just entering this space right now, what am I going to gravitate towards? What do I think is going to make me the most money? And I would always just try to like front run that, I guess. So, and even when you look at like technical analysis, like that's all based on belief system, psychology, right? So like even then, like like looking at candlesticks, like that is just a representation of the general market sentiment at the time.
And you've mentioned a lot of altcoins, which is like blowing my mind because a lot of parallels with what is going on right now. Even the cheaper, faster sounds really, really familiar. And then what it's interesting me is the fact that you said you could now have the safety net, or you were say cashing out some money and buying real estate, if I know from correctly. Can you explain your approach and why? I think that's going to be really useful now in this coming bull market for people to hear.
Yeah, sure. To be frank, my parents weren't stoked that I dropped out of law school, and I had to sort of give them a reason to why I, left. And at the time, even in 2017, like people didn't get cryptocurrency; they had no idea what I was doing. My grandmother, was reading news articles about, the dark market and dark web and Silk Road and everything, and I think she just thought I was a drug dealer, to be honest. So yeah, like it was definitely, I think, challenging for them to like sort of like believe in what I saw. And I had in my mind, the reason why I bought all of this property, such as the commercial real estate, the residential properties as well, was absolute worst case, this goes to zero. I still have something that's going to give me an income stream, right? Like I'm still fine, and that was the most important thing for me. I always have to like, you need to navigate risks, well, and this was the best way that I could, navigate, that possibility. Even if there's a 1% chance of that happening, I just didn't want to ever fall victim to that. So that's why I really had to like, get some like, recurring income from property to like help me then like give me that confidence to like keep pushing into this space and continue to trade and invest full time without any other real income coming in, especially in a bear market, right? It's an incredibly challenging thing to do. So it definitely helped during like these like cyclical moments when not only when it's going up but when it's going down, you still have some sort of like cash coming in as well.
That's super smart. Having come from the real estate arena before Web3, it's definitely top of mind on how to create those cash flow moments. So, and I think it's an important lesson for anybody out there to be able to say the diversification, right? Like I think a lot of us probably have more percentage of net worth into illiquid JPEGs and crypto than we care to admit, but like
Yeah.
that's it's also important to do that, and that's actually very very wise advice. I appreciate you sharing that. But speaking about like the psychology of things, you know, you, you've mentioned before that you like to have very concentrated bets. One of my favorite things on X is watching some of the sales feeds when there's a seed phrase sweep on a
Getting
project.
that broom out.
Yeah. So you have a very concentrated versus like maybe more of the traditional like diversify your portfolio. Can you kind of touch on some of the logic behind that, and then maybe a process or mental checklist that you find for finding those high conviction opportunities?
To be honest, it's just like, it's always, how I've invested. If you put the time into the research and you genuinely can back the fundamentals, I just find everything else falls into place. I've always been an all or nothing kind of guy. And, there's no point putting all of the research into something in particular. And, you've checked every single box, right? Like, even like looking at, like, my play on Ripple, right? Like all of my boxes were checked. I loved the team. I loved the tech. I loved the use case. It was a great market fit. But imagine if I had only put in maybe 5 or 10% of my net worth into that. Like I still would have done well, but it's not going to change my life, right? So like I'm always looking at these like opportunities that can be like life changing, and as long as I can justify it to myself, through a process, right? What is this community? What is the use case? Who's the team behind it? Is this something that could be appealing to a mass market? You just have to go through that checklist, and if you can check most of those boxes, that then will determine how much I put into a particular investment. And honestly, like not everything has worked out, but the ones that have worked out have returned, made up for that plus a lot more as well, right? Like no one's ever going to have a 100% accuracy in this, but you only really need like even 50% of those to play out, and you find yourself going from $4,000 to $100 million, right?
If you can hit at a 50% rate, that's incredible. I mean that with a it's funny because we have a lot of very analogous thought processes, but I mean, even if one thing 10x is and only 10% of your bets hit, like you're still break even, right? So like when you're beating that, that's where it becomes like the asymmetric upside. I really am impressed with how you've been able to identify those opportunities? Is there a mental model outside of teams, or is it really just like teams plus intuition that works for you?
Yeah, it is. It's mostly like intuition. It is really just like, looking at the product itself, looking at the team behind it, looking at the community. Are they engaged? One thing I really love is cults. Like, do you have like a cultish type community? Will they die for you, right? And like, that's one of my more like famous bets in recent times was creeps, right? I was buying these things in the peak of the bear market. I just sold my hoodie ape CryptoPunk, so I was, very, liquid at the time. And these things were sitting around the 1 ETH floor. No one really cared about them outside of the community itself. But my goodness, like, the community there, they are so engaged. They, you do one tweet about creeps and it's going to be your highest engagement tweet of the month, right? They're all responding, they're all liking, they're all retweeting. What Joe and Dom have built there is truly special. And that's really like, what I look to do, like I really like, I think that's a really good use case example of like how I try to spot good projects. And it seems to have worked out. Like they had a highly successful portal launch. The creeps community got a good chunk of portal as well. They still have multiple airdrops coming out for the creeps holders. It just reminds me of like early Bored Ape vibes a little bit. Like getting these like constant sort of like value adds additions to just like simply just holding this asset. But I think they're going to go beyond that and really create some incredible utility and community, which is what they have already. So yeah, very excited for the future of creeps as well.
That's awesome. Now, I know that you've been very, very astute at picking some of this stuff off. I've loved watching and hearing some of your narratives around everything from like GM DAO assets to Wolf Game and others. Like it's pretty awesome to hear. So I mean, to speaking about it, like Nifty talked about your journey, right? Like you started with 4K in Bitcoin and you've grown it over, call it net worth over 100 million. Is there anything that's different for you when changing your investment style between, like 4K versus 500K versus 5 million versus 100 million? Or if yes, I'd love to know how maybe that changes for you. And if no, why the hell not?
Well, one thing is the level of risk that you would take, right? So when someone's at 4K, I think you would take a lot more risk to like to grow that on like a meme coin or something, than someone with, let's say, 100 million. I'm not going to be betting on Bowden or Tremp or any of these meme coins with $100 million, because one, they're incredibly illiquid. Two, the market cap's too low anyway. So it also just like you have to also look at the coin or the investment itself. Can that coin, can the liquidity, the volume, the market cap, can that handle the level of capital that you're going to be putting into it? You don't ever want to become the market yourself. I have in the past found myself sometimes being the market. Even just like going back to that creeps example, like when I was sweeping creeps, I think I was the only person buying creeps, and that's a very uncomfortable position to be in as well, right? So you never want to be that. But I would just say, like when you do have, a much smaller, a capital size, you should, and especially if you're younger as well, like you should be taking risks. Like I think like it makes sense to bet on the next Bohm or Pepe or Whiff or things like that, because some of these meme coins are quite illiquid. They do have small market caps, but they can handle a 4K investment, right? Whereas like with 100 million, you can't just put that all into one investment. Like my strategy that I spoke about before, going all in on something, it just doesn't work with 100 million. You have to split that across maybe 10, 20, 30 different projects.
And also, you don't need to take those massive risks now. Probably it's wiser to also diversify.
Yeah. Well, exactly. The thing is, like, again, like just an example, I'm very happy these days to make like a 3 to 4 or 5x on something, which I still think is very conservative in crypto, right? Like typically in a bull market, you're going to at least see a 10x minimum. And, if you're making a 3, 4, 5x on like a substantial size, that is very life changing. Whereas like, if you're making 3, 4, 5x on 4K, it maybe pays the bills for the next year, So like that is like sort of like, what I'm saying as well. You really need to sort of like assess, what's your best strategy with the capital that you have.
I love what moves the needle kind of approach.
And it's the
Exactly.
power of compounding, right? Like, I mean, you mentioned it, like 3 to 5x is, I mean, I hate to say it again, not financial advice for any of this stuff,
Yeah,
but
never.
it's fairly attainable if you play your cards properly within the Web3 space. But if you do that 3 times over the
Mhm.
course of, call it 10 years, like that's real money in the patience versus just a
Serious
meme
money.
coin. So, I mean, very astute advice. And I was going to say, I thought it was really funny when you're talking about like the exit liquidity on creeps that Von Mises, when we interviewed him,
You never
had a
want to be
very,
the market.
well,
I've been
he
there
was
too
saying the
many
same thing
times.
when he was buying punks. Like he was like, man, he bought his zombie and he's like, are these OGs dumping into my bids because like I'm the only one buying? And it's,
Question yourself. Like I was the same way. Like, when I entered the CryptoPunks Discord and started sweeping punks up, I had like Hember in my DMs being like, hey man, like I've got like 500 punks. Do you want to buy them OTC? And I was like, are these guys just dumping on like the newcomers? Like, and this is like when punks were not even an ETH yet. Like, I think they're like 0.5 of an ETH. So they were still incredibly cheap. They still had a lot to prove, right, in the scheme of things. And I was worried for a little while. Like when I did have 40, 50 punks, I bought zombies, I bought apes, I bought the 7 trait punk, I bought a 0 trait punk. I put a substantial amount of capital into this. And at one point I was really starting to question, my sanity.
Let's talk a little bit about selling, because you mentioned before your Hoodie Ape that you sold for 3,300 ETH, $4.5 million at the time, bought it for 150 ETH. So great sale. Also, you timed perfectly the 2017 top. Also, you were selling some of your collection at Sotheby's. And you mentioned before that you've got a couple offers, $25 million offer for your glyph set, and an auction house that offered you $200 million for your 7 attribute on consignment. Crazy figures.
Yeah.
How do you decide when to sell, especially pristine assets like a Hoodie Ape CryptoPunk?
Yeah, look, like there's a few factors, right? Like typically I'll look at like the market conditions. Like is the market frothy? Is grandma calling about Bitcoin? Is Farouk screaming super cycle? That's usually when I'm gonna get out. That's usually my top signal. Or like when people are taking the screenshots of their P&Ls and making tons of money, that's when it gets scary. So yeah, typically like that's when I'll sell out of like my coin positions. NFTs are different because I sometimes buy NFTs not just because I want to make money from them, but just because I genuinely like them. Like that Hoodie Ape sale was like very hard for me. It really felt like I was losing a child because for me it's probably the best ape CryptoPunk there is. Hoodie Ape, it's just so iconic. But there's no greater feeling than having some liquidity during a bear market as well, right? Whoever's got liquidity during a bear market, again, going back to those compounding returns, you're going to typically make a lot more in a bull market. So, even though I sold the ape for how much was it? 6 million. I think it was about 6 million.
4.5, I have the number. I might be wrong.
Okay, so 4 point, yeah. So let's say like bear market. I sell one of the greatest hoodie ape CryptoPunks for 4.5 million, which I think even sounds low today. But the thought of like being able to like 10x that in a bull market was like just too alluring. Like I really wanted to be a little bit more liquid. So yeah, like it really just comes down to like, is it frothy market conditions? Get out. Like, do I need, some more capital liquidity? Are there some like great opportunities to be able to like deploy this into? I wouldn't just sell, an NFT just for the sake of just having the money, unless I wanted to like roll that into another investment and thought that was going to be a better long-term investment, right? So that is usually like what I'm looking for. Usually you can tell on Twitter or X, as they call it today, when the markets are getting a little bit too frothy because everyone's screaming and super cycles and this and that. So it's usually pretty obvious when it's time to sell.
It's crazy because one idea that was resonating with me is that maybe those ultra blue chip assets might generate even more money if you sell one of those during the bear and redeploy those funds versus selling it at the top, which the number is going to be crazy, but maybe is not as big.
Well, that was my thought just recently. So I think it was 3-4 weeks ago, I got an offer for my Autoglyphs. Someone offered me $15 million. And my immediate reaction was no. Like, I don't want to sell my full set of Autoglyphs. There's only, I think, 8 possible sets in the world. These things are iconic, historical, culturally, very relevant as well. And then I slept on it. I spoke to, some, very good friends of mine, and they said to me, like, they almost like slapped me in the face. They're like, what are you doing? $15 million right now in today's market. What does that look like in 6 to 12 months time? You're not selling these autoglyphs for 15 million. You're potentially selling these autoglyphs for, let's say, 45 million, right? Like, even if you could just 3x that money, I think that is like life-changing amounts of money, right? So, thinking back at it now and like looking back, obviously by that point, Seth had already moved in and, sold his set instead. But like looking back, like I think maybe that was like a pretty good opportunity to, buffer the reserves a little bit. But at the same time, like I really do want to, build a name, in the digital art space. And, I think having that full set of autoglyphs that just anchors my entire collection, I think it's just so powerful. And like all the money in the world, even if, this cycle works out really well and the next cycle and the next cycle, there's so many cycles, right? Will anything, bring you close to the amount of like, happiness that full set of autoglyphs will give you, knowing that you're only one of 8 people in the world who's going to have, such a historical set.
Yeah, I mean, you're comfy now. Like at this point, at least my interpretation of observing you online is you're playing for legacy, right? And we'll get into some of the other stuff you're doing on the side, but I mean, to own a glyph is amazing. To own a glyph set, like you said, to be one of 8 that's legendary, right? So it definitely plays into that legacy that I see you going for. So kudos to you for passing up 15 mil. I think a lot of lesser individuals would have jumped at the opportunity.
It was funny. I was actually in Paris at the time, and I spoke to Snowfro, Eric, and he was like, those same people came to me. And I was like, what was your number? And he was like 100 million. He's like, no less. And even at 100 million, I don't think I would sell. So there's some serious diamond hands, in these like, this group of full set collectors. And, it's definitely, a very esteemed group to be amongst.
Probably there are a few more sales happening and then locked away forever.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I feel like there's some people, such as Eric, who just would never sell.
Agree. And we've talked about sales. What's your opinion on NFT lending?
Yeah, look, like I love lending. I end of last year, it was announced that I'm advising Gondi. I also, invested in their early round. And this is just something that the space has needed for a very long time. There has been other, obviously like lending platforms in the past. But I just found that Gondi's platform in particular was just incredibly intuitive. It was very borrower safe as well. Like there was no sort of like hidden tricks anywhere where you could like potentially just lose your assets. They also, I had multiple meetings with them, in person and online, reassuring me that, this platform is incredibly safe. It has had multiple independent audits, because obviously that is the first thing that comes to my mind, right? Like I don't want to be placing some, highly valuable NFTs into this like, smart contract that just ends up getting hacked. And, once they assured me, that's when I ended up, moving, a good chunk of my portfolio into Gondi because, going back to what we're talking about, having cash in a bear or like the start of a bull market, that there's no greater feeling and no better sort of opportunity to, make money, right? And, I love my NFT collection. There's a lot of things I never want to really sell. And, it's hard seeing all of this capital locked away, on my Trezor, not really doing anything and not being able to like take advantage of that. And then being able to finally like unlock some of that capital to then play these markets. I just recently loaned 3 autoglyphs on Gondi and, in return, I got $600,000, right? And my thinking there is, I'm paying 20% over the next 6 months. In a bull market, all I have to do is beat 20% and I'm in profit, right? So I've spent multiple nights now researching coins that haven't yet, exploded, right? Like, there's so many like AI coins and even Solana. I think Solana is still going to do incredibly well, by the way. Like, I think it's going to go to probably $1,000 or something. But I'm more looking at like some of these coins that are just sort of like they've had the big spike in 2021, and then they've had like the dead cat bounce, and then they've gone all the way to the very bottom and just been flat for, let's say, 2 years, and now they're just starting to curl up with volume. I love those sort of charts. So I've just been, and also, backing that with the team fundamentals. Is it still active? What's their treasury looking like as well? Like I love finding coins and projects that have hundreds of millions of dollars still in the bank. They still have an active community. They still have a product there. They still have a team. It's just they got hit by a bear market. That's all it was. So yeah, I've been really specializing in that in the last few days. Actually, I've been just really researching and looking to deploy this. My goal here is just to beat 20% in the next 6 months, which I think I can do.
It's pretty admirable. I mean, we referenced before we started recording G Money, and we spoke about his $1 million loan against his ape, and it was the same kind of rationale, right? Like, to beat 20% feels like an uphill battle to a lot of in the traditional space, but I admire you having the courage to do it, and more than that, obviously you invest in Gandhi because you believe in the space, but really putting your money where your mouth is, or your assets where your mouth is, right? And I think that that's really showing a way to financialize some of the art that we all know and love without taking that taxable event, right, and monetizing them. So I definitely would love to follow that journey as you go along the way, because it's going to be, I think, very, very fruitful and similar to you. I'm staring at some of those charts, being like, I shared with Nifty some of them off the airwaves of like, I get excited because I'm like, I don't know when, but these are going to have like,
You're gonna pop.
they're going to pop. And when they do, it's going to be massive. So yeah, that's kudos to you. I really love that play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I think, a lot of people think we're seeing an alt season right now, but we haven't even started yet. We've seen some of the usual suspects like Solana and AI coins and memes popping off. But I would say like 80 to 90% of the coins that I've been looking at, like they have barely moved. They may be 2x the floor that they were at maybe only like a few months ago. So yeah, like I said, looking for that curling upwards pattern with like increased volume. I love those sort of charts.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to talk offline since this is all not financial advice here.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to your punks discovery, because we talked about your psychology, and then also like the legal, which I find more analytical. You know your passion for punks and the ability to dig into the project has been very admirable. It's very analogous to, I think, like what Nifty and I's passion for Squiggles are, right? Like, meaning you've owned an ape, a zombie, zero trait, most notably your PFP, right, which is the only one with 7 traits. We dug into the Discord, and back in May 2020 in the punks Discord, you said you're interested to know how many punks have 5, 6, and 7 traits, right? So
Mhm.
you were early on to something before traits were even a thing. How do you attribute that? And were you the first one to pay attention? And why was it an observation that stood out to you, if you don't mind us asking?
Yeah, like, as I mentioned, like I'm all or nothing, right? Like, when I discover something interesting, that's like, piqued my interest a little bit. I love to get my hands dirty. I love to get into the Discord. I love to like chat to the community members. I want to sort of like get that, that feedback from the community. What are their thoughts on things? And, one of my first messages in the punks Discord was, like, what's the rarest CryptoPunk? Like if I'm all or nothing, I want the best, right? And a lot of people were mentioning this one particular punk, 8348, that had 7 traits, because there wasn't even a traits page at the time on CryptoPunk, so no one even knew, really paid attention to traits. And then of course like aliens as well. It was like basically like a toss up between the two. And I explored, the aliens. They were all being held in diamond hands, but I really loved the idea of owning a punk that no one else could get their hands on. For me, that was the all in basically, and it was just honestly, it was just great timing. At the time, Go West Bitcoin, he was the original owner of the 7 Trade CryptoPunk, and many other incredible assets. I actually also bought my full set of autoglyphs from him as well. Thank you, Go West. But yeah, it was also just good timing because I think some people are sometimes a little bit too early as well, right? And then when you have been holding these bags for a long time and you haven't seen any movement, you do want to sort of, I guess, offload some of that risk as well. And I was back and forth with him. Not only did I love the 7 Trade Punk, but I loved how it looked. Like with 7 attributes, how everything, it was just so aesthetic. Like everything worked on it. From the top hat to the cigarette to the big beard. Like there's some like incredibly ugly 6 Trade Punks. Like they've got spots and squiggly hair, and there's traits crossing over other traits. It was nothing like that at all. Like it was like this really clean, beautiful punk, which is very hard to get with so many traits. That's why I also love like 1 Trade punks, right? Because they're also incredibly beautiful to look at. It just highlights that one particular trait. So yeah, that's really was like my thinking, and along with that as well, so that was a record sale at the time, and then I think maybe like a week later, I broke that record by buying the albino female 0 Trade as well. I think I paid 100 ETH for her. And people were losing their minds, like, this guy's lost the plot, this is crazy. But like it was more like thinking like, again, it goes back to, I guess, my technical skills from trading, right? Like when I look at a coin, I immediately want to look at the FTV, the market cap, volumes, all of these like like these like indicators that can sort of like give you some sort of like indication to like where this could potentially go in the future if the fundamentals also hold up as well. And I thought that the punks at the time, they had such an incredible fundamental basis to them. They were very already quite culturally ingrained within the NFT space already. But the market cap for these things was tiny. It was I can't recall what it was, but it was like maybe like $5-10 million maybe. So it was tiny, and for me, I just saw like there was so much upside potential. If it was basically a bet on Web3, right? Like if Web3 ever takes off, punks are going with it. Like there's no like punks take off without Web3 going off, or Web3 going off without punks going off. Like they're going to shoot up together. And that's what we saw. As soon as like everyone, millions of people started entering the space. Along with that adoption curve, we also saw punks also rocket as well. So that thesis ended up actually playing out. To how I played it, and I still hold a considerable bag of punks even to this day. Because some of them are forever holds. Maybe I'll sell Nate Alex's Choker Pilot back to him one day. He still begs me for it back. But yeah, like you can't beat those like early memories of the space as well.
Do you remember what percentage of your portfolio was allocated to punks those days?
So at the time, I was very invested mostly in punks, Axie Infinity. I was the largest land holder at one point. I also owned thousands of Axies, many Mystic Axies as well. I would say Axies and punks were like my 2 big bets, along with like my coin bets as well. And it was a little bit later on when I actually really got to understand generative art, because I was seeing these autoglyphs at a 3 ETH floor and just thinking like, what is this QR code? Like this thing doesn't make sense to me at all. And then finally taking the time to learn about generative art and the beauty in code and how that can be expressed artistically. I was like, oh wow, that was like the mind-blowing moment. And yeah, I basically again, Go West, he listed a full set for 150K. No one was biting. No one was going to pay 150K for a full set, when the floor I think was only at like 3 ETH or 4 ETH or something at the time. So when I swooped in and grabbed that full set, again, people thought I was nuts, but I just loved the story behind them. Loved their place in history, and it obviously ended up playing out the way I wanted it to as well.
And those are the massive opportunities where everyone around thinks you are dumb or crazy. Probably those is where some of those are.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. It's like, like you don't want to be in a crowded room when you're making these decisions, right? Like I hate investing, when it's already saturated, like when the whole timeline's talking about it, when everyone's in, the opportunity has already been missed. Like you really need to put in that time to really, like, you need to dig deep sometimes, like really dig that hole and discover these, like, little facets of this, much grander beautiful industry of ours. Like it's not just NFTs. It's like digital art. It's gaming. It's access tokens. It's all of that. So yeah, like it is just a matter of like sort of trying to spot narratives, different metas, thinking what hasn't taken off just yet. And that's why I think AI art's a great one to be looking at, because I think again, not financial advice, but it definitely ticks a lot of those boxes that I look for. With investing, low market cap, relevance, significance. It's obviously a hot topic at the moment with Nvidia and ChatGPT and everything. So that's what I'm sort of like looking for, at least anyway.
And talking about art, generative art, you've mentioned recently that you prefer squiggles versus punks around these levels, which we obviously love to hear. What's your thesis behind that?
Again, it goes back to market caps, right? There's 10,000 squiggles, there's 10,000 punks. Squiggles I think are trading around 5 ETH, 6 ETH right now. Yeah, they're about 5 ETH right now. Punks are I think around 50 ETH. I haven't checked the markets today. So I just think like even for squiggles to match punks, that's a 10x. And I feel like when it comes to their cultural, historical relevance, they are some of the first very like visually appealing, generative art pieces, right? And then also not only that, but it kickstarted an entire movement with art blocks. And when you have the Snowfro tag on it, you always have that premium. So I do feel like Squiggles do deserve to be up there, amongst the best. And I've been doubling down on them in recent months. Even I was buying them at 9 ETH and now they're 5. Damn it! But that's the thing. It's like you have to be long sighted on this. You can't just be buying this for the next 6 months. Like Squiggles is a 2, 3, 5, 10-year play. And I think whoever does hold some of these grail pieces are going to be incredibly happy in the future. There's no real like downside. I guess there's always risk, but I feel like that's somewhat mitigated with Squiggles, right? Like I feel like if Squiggles go down, I feel like that means just the whole generative art market's just crashing. There's no real reality where I feel like Squiggles themselves would like dive to zero.
The risk reward right now feels a little asymmetric. I mean, especially when you think about like Derek talking about networked assets and the holy trinity of punks, squiggles, and glyphs. It feels like when the intention rotates, which I'm confident it will be really, really amazing. But you mentioned like the future of Squiggles. Like, what do you see the future of Squiggles like outside of maybe even just the finances?
Yeah, look, like I think we are going to start seeing them being accepted into a lot more like art institutions. I believe that like we see it today, right? But the traditional art world doesn't see it. But I think one interesting development that I noticed at least last year, like going to Freeze, going to like some like nice like art events and dinners and things like that, was digital art is still considered to be like blasphemous a little bit from the traditional art world. They turn their nose up to it and they don't really believe in it. But one interesting takeaway was that they actually, if they were ever to enter digital art, it was going to be through generative art, and Squiggles in particular was always one that was getting brought up. So I do believe that Squiggles they will be that, initial step for adoption, when we do start to, bring in, that like more like traditional art market into our world, because they're just so easy to digest as well. Like they do things that traditional art can't do. Just the fact that they move, right? You can't have moving traditional art. And I again, like they have a great story. They're aesthetic, and I can see more and more, like patrons and people like that, really starting to like push the envelope on this and really start getting them into that public eye a little bit more through large institutions and museums and things like that as well.
Yeah, I think the Squiggle is easily relatable. I often relate it to like splatter paint and what Pollock did, right? Like it's oddly familiar and yet distinctly unique and directly identifiable to the creator. So I think there's a lot of upside there. Speaking of the creator, Eric, also known as Snowfro, I'm sure you've engaged with him a lot in the Punks Discord. But one of the fun things is, we obviously are very big supporters, and we think he's one of the best stewards of Web3. Is there one word that comes to mind when to describe Snow for you?
Many words come to mind, but the one word that I think stands out is humble. I think he's the most gracious, humble human being. He's very intelligent. What he's done for this entire industry is incredible. It's very, I admire him and what he's done for this space, and he deserves all the success that he's experienced so far. And yeah, that's the one word: humble, incredible human.
That's a great one. Beautiful, beautiful answer. Changing a little bit topics, you are a DJ as well, and you debuted in 2021 during NFT NYC with a helmet, by the way, that was created by Ironhead Studios, the same for Marshmallow helmet, and they do also marble costumes. What are you are building a brand with your seventh rate? What are your ultimate aspirations with that brand?
Yeah, look, like it's interesting how that came about because it was 2021. It was my first NFT NYC. I was talking to my good friend Michael Perro, and he was organizing an event during that week, and he just said to me like, "Wouldn't it be cool to bring Seedphrase to life?" He's like, I know the Shalizi group, I know Marshmallow. I could just ask them where they get the helmet made. Maybe we just turn your punk into a helmet, and you could like DJ in it. And I loved the idea. Obviously NFTs are a very like digital experience, and I really loved that. We could bring this digital experience to life, into the flesh, and actually people being able to like interact with like a real life punk. So yeah, we went out, we got connected, we built this helmet. It was meant to be like this once off. It was such an insane event as well. There was, I was DJing with Steve Aoki, Don Diablo, Blondish, Troy Boy was there. Even Chris, turned up as well, Marshmallow. It was just the most wildest time. And, Disney was there as well doing a documentary. And just seeing how people's, faces lit up when they saw the punk and, saw me in real life and taking like selfies and things like that. It really brought me a lot of joy. I really loved that moment. And I was thinking, like maybe I have something here, like maybe this shouldn't just be a once off. Maybe I should actually, professionally pursue it, which is then, what I ended up doing. I already had the helmet built anyway. And then, like not soon after that, I, got represented by WME. They reached out to me and they said, look, like we love what you're doing with Seedphrase. Would you like some representation? And then yeah, like since then, I've released Angels last summer. It was an incredible launch. In Saint Tropez, we were playing it. The beach clubs there. And now we're working on more music. We've got a few more tracks coming out for this summer. Really pushing, into the music side of things even more so these days as well. Playing a lot more. I think I'm playing 2 or 3 times in New York next month. Also 2 times I think in Dubai next month as well. So really just ramping it up, from the music side of things.
So you mentioned the upcoming music releases, which everybody should check out. But you've also announced that you're going to do some fashion as well. We talked off camera about another project. mean, you're a lot going on. Is there, anything you want to share with everybody that A, what are you not doing? But then B, like, what is it that's captivated your attention in the projects that really have your attention and your enthusiasm?
Yeah, look, like I view Seedphrase as very much, like it's multifaceted. There's many different moving parts. I possess this incredible brand IP, and I wanted to, bring this to the masses, right? Like, how do you bring this to the world? So across multiple, different pillars, foundations. I've got the music side of things that's I'm working on. Also in gaming as well. I'm going to be announcing the Seven Traits card game, in the coming weeks, which is going to be, incredible as well. It's going to be definitely an opportunity for people to learn more about the punk itself. A lot of people know of Seedphrase, they know the punk, but they don't really know what makes it different, right? Like, why is it iconic? And this card game is going to be all about, like teaching people about the punk itself and having fun with your friends and people online and community, being rewarded. I think it's gonna really land well with the especially the current gaming following that I have as well. Obviously I've been making a lot of strategic gaming investments and advising a number of gaming projects as well. So it's gonna really encapsulate that as well. And then on the fashion things, I'm going to be releasing a capsule with redacted. I can't unfortunately announce that soon. And then also on the art side of things, I am planning to very, very heavily push more into the art world as well. I have such an incredible generative art collection. We spoke about the Squiggles, we spoke about the Autoglyphs, themes and variations. I've got it all. So I want to almost separate that from what Seedphrase is doing, and I want to turn that into its own entirely own entity. I'm going to be calling it the Maygod collection. And how I like to think of it is, Seedphrase is just like the expression of what's in the Maygod collection. So the Maygod collection holds the punk, but Seedphrase is that front-facing entertainer, right? So I think it just makes sense to, in a way to separate the brands a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to be pushing more into that. I'm going to be, through that, uplifting artists. I'm going to be bridging that gap between digital and traditional. I've got an announcement. Again, I wish we did this episode maybe in 2 weeks' time, but I'm bringing a major artist to a large US, art institution, which is going to be, quite significant. Probably by the time that this is released, people already know about it. But doing a lot of things in the art space, a lot of things in music, a lot of things in fashion, and also the gaming now too, which is going to be fantastic.
And kudos for you for bringing it all together too under a brand. Thank and you. Really showing the Web3 space that anything's possible, and being everywhere all at once and pursuing your passions is incredible. So I think it's admirable, and I also don't know when you sleep. So congratulations.
Yeah, I'm busy. Well, the thing is I feel like that's one thing that has yet to be explored. I don't think I am anywhere near where I want to be just yet, right? And that is people taking advantage, of their PFPs, their brands, their IP. What can you do with your Pudgy Penguin? What can you do with your Bored Ape? What can you do with your CryptoPunk? We have seen a lot of people, such as 6529 and G Money. They've built brands, around their PFP. But it's how do we take that to another level, right? How do we get, that mass adoption and that recognition? I want people to learn about Seedphrase, through my music, for example, not through Web3, and then, vice versa as well. There must be many funnels that, it takes you to Seedphrase, not just through NFTs. And sorry about this bell.
Really,
it's uniquely European, man. It's authentic. I love it.
Everyone's gonna be like, this guy lives in Switzerland.
People that track you down based on that harmonics, man.
Yeah. Oh God, my biggest fear.
Okay, so really respect the ambition and the hustle. It's incredible. Still at that level that you are still pushing the envelope on all fronts and investing and active on every front. So it's crazy.
Thank you.
Let's finish with some rapid fire questions. Answers don't need to be rapid fire, so take as much time as you need. First one, you have many grails, probably the top grails in the market, but any grail that got away and the story behind it?
Any grail that got away? Um, I don't know if this is a grail just yet. Maybe they still have to prove themselves. But I like them. Like I personally think they're great as node monkeys. And I had been eyeing the hoodie alien for months. And I was thinking of pulling the trigger on it, and then someone bought it the other week. So that's definitely one that got away. There's countless art blocks that got away as well. There's too many to name. There's always. That's probably why sometimes it looks like I'm overpaying for some of these things. It's just because I just don't want anyone else to even have a chance, like a look in on it. There's so many art blocks out there that were like rare and desirable that end up getting bought under my nose. But yeah, like I would say it was mostly those. Obviously, there's like a bunch of punks in there as well at some point as well. But all in all, there's also been some disappointments. Selling things a little bit too early. I used to have the beanie zombie. I think I sold that for 50K. It's now probably worth multiples of millions. And then again, I still miss the hoodie ape as well. Obviously it helped me out at the time and served its purpose, but it's just such a great ape.
It's interesting because the overpaying thing. I was listening to Barbara Corcoran, one of the real estate moguls in New York, and she was saying when you are looking for a prime property, you need to overpay by definition.
You just jump on it. Yeah, exactly.
Same with NFTs.
It's the same thing. Like the thing is, like if it's priced too competitively, it just gets snapped up instantly. So if you want this like desirable asset, you need to just jump and move on it ASAP.
Well, let's say one of the grails that you snapped up that I'm a little bit sad about from my personal stories is that Guide One Night. I call it the psychedelic anti-cyclone. That was the all-time high.
Yes.
I think it's the best in the collection, and I was trying to negotiate it. The seller was not moving whatsoever. So when I saw it sell, it was a sad day for me, but I'm happy it's in a good home.
That one in particular is exactly the example that I was alluding to before. Like I probably overpaid on that by a small margin, but I just had to move on it. I knew other people were interested in it. I saw a lot of people messaging about it on the Discord. I knew people were hitting them up on DMs. I was like, look, if I want this, I just have to jump on it now.
And probably it's overpaying at the time. Looking forward.
Well, even like looking back at like my CryptoPunk investments, right? Like I said, like I at the time recorded the largest sale in history by buying the female albino zero trade for 100 ETH, and everyone was like, oh my goodness, like I can't believe this guy just paid 100 ETH for a CryptoPunk. These things are selling for like 0.5 ETH each or something. But then I ended up flipping it in like a year for I think like 550 ETH or something. Now they're probably worth even more, because what I liked about her and why I jumped on her was because she was the rarest zero trade. Albino is the rarest skin type. Females are rarer than males, so that's why I liked her.
That's crazy. And related to what we are discussing, you've been consistently early and right. You understood Bitcoin in 2013, NFTs early 2020, punks. What is grabbing your attention right now?
Yeah, like as I mentioned, I really do like AI art right now. For many different reasons. I just think this is a really good time to be getting into it. We're finally the world has being exposed to ChatGPT and what has been happening in the AI industry, and I think it's finally real. People can touch and feel it now, and actually play around with it, and it's good. Like it's actually pretty good these days, right? So I don't think that narrative is dying anytime soon. They're already talking about ChatGPT 5 this summer. Nvidia keeps beating earnings. I think they may have just dropped the other day, but over the last year they've been beating. So yeah, like and when again, like it comes down to market caps, I think the entire AI market cap right now is like $50 million. So when you compare that to generative art, when you compare that to CryptoPunks, when you compare that to coins, it's minuscule. There's a lot of upside there. And as well as like generative art, I really like, some of those like early collections. And I think that that's what's going to, hold value with AI art as well. Some of that early AI art. I think when AI art is too perfect, like it already is today, like the fingers are now pretty good and, things are quite lifelike. I think there's going to be value in that like ugliness of like the early AI art, right? Like I think that's like that at one point was all that it could produce. Now that's scarce, right? Unless it's been told to produce it like that. So, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of value in like some of that early stuff, such as like deep black. Even just recently, a recent collection I've been buying was like nice aunties. Again, not financial advice. This is just something that's interesting me at the time. But yeah, I think it has a lot of like upside potentially.
I think that ugliness is part of the journey, and it's captivated my attention. It's actually for my fun given the best returns recently, but I also think it's you know there's a potentiality of like paper handing some of these historic pieces as you're referring to. So it's definitely top of mind. I think it's here to stay too. It's really cool to hear your perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely agreed with you.
Danny, you have had tremendous success in your career and you're still pushing with investing, with projects, with DJing, fashion, games. What motivates you to continue?
Ooh, interesting. Purpose. When I was 26, when I first made a little bit of money, back in 2017, and it probably happened like a little bit too quick. Like I went from, a university student with very little money to suddenly being worth, tens of millions, right? And I think that that can sort of like play on your mind a little bit, like why me out of all of these other, billions of people in the world. And I think for a year I was just soul searching. I was just like I gave up on crypto. I wasn't interested in the markets anymore. I had completely blown out all targets where I wanted to be in life. I was thinking like, oh, like maybe here I can be happy. I can live a comfortable life. And then just when you completely shatter that and blast straight through it, it's just like rocks your world. You're like, wow, like what what's my purpose now? And every morning, I was traveling for I think like 8 months out of the year, and just traveling around South America, Central America, North America, Europe, Asia. And I think just like one morning, I just said to myself, like, what's my purpose in life? What am I doing? What's next? Like, okay, this is where my goalpost was in the past. Obviously, I overshot that by like a good mile, but how do I now raise that even higher, right? Like, and how do I like, and just be able to like re-energize myself, remotivate myself, right? Like, this isn't where the story stops. It's like, how can I now maybe even make more money? How can I grow a legacy? How do I build something beyond me, right? Like, when I die in 80 years time or whenever, like, how have I left this earth? What's my my footprint? And it really did come down to like making some sort of like change for future generations, for my children. And that's really how it all sort of like got reinvigorated and got me excited again and got me back into the markets and hungry.
Makes total sense. I remember Tim Ferriss' book was coming to mind, the chapter of filling the void, which is pretty common when you reach a target, you can suddenly retire, and now what? So
Yeah, I went through that. It was just like it was almost depressive, like I was just like like also traveling South America, Asia, Central America, you have a lot of money compared to these people. And, I was feeling incredibly guilty even, like I was watching some man, he must be like in his 50s. It was like serving tourists sandwiches at like 4 a.m. And I was just like, damn, like this guy's making $1, per sandwich. And he's been doing this his entire life, So like, it really took like a lot of like soul searching and personal development to like get out of that and to really start to push myself, forward and to start focusing on a more higher goal.
couple more from me. One is you've mentioned that you've traveled to more than 40 countries. You are also, like wine, are a food aficionado. What's your perfect destination or plan to unplug?
I love wine. That's definitely no secret. It honestly, it depends for me. It depends on the season. If it's winter, I love skiing. I've been to the mountains many times this winter. I also love summers. I probably have to say I love summer even more. Coming from Australia, I was very fortunate to grow up on a beautiful white sandy beach with good weather and tropics and forests and things like that. So I do enjoy that in the summertime in Europe as well. Going to some of my favorite destinations in the south of France and Ibiza, of course. And but again, it just depends on what you're looking for. Sometimes I love Ibiza. Sometimes I just want to like go chill in the mountains somewhere and just relax and not see anyone. So it just really just depends on like how I am sitting at the time.
Different vibes, of course. And I guess that you obviously know Formentera. It's one of my favorite places on earth.
Beautiful. I love Formentera. Yeah, great. It's magnificent, and that's what draws me to Ibiza every summer.
Last one from me is a lot of people are going to be in a similar position where you were in 2013. What's your advice to those people now that we are entering this bull market?
Yeah, look, like I think the best way to do it is you need to be active. You have to put the time in. You have to be on Twitter daily. You need to understand the current meta. You need to understand narratives. Psychology definitely does help. Like why are people suddenly drifting towards this particular subset of the industry, right? So like you need to be able to understand this. You need to have your finger on the pulse, always hungry, always looking, go into those weird dark, discords and, mingle around and, see what's out there because, some of the biggest returns are going to come from the most unlikely places.
I will say that's very astute advice. And then always take profit, whatever it is for you to hit your
Always
goal.
take profit. Yeah, and also always remember taxes as well.
That's probably an even more important. No matter where you're at, they're coming after you after that. But yeah, pay those taxes, especially coming up into the States.
I've heard so many horror stories of like people taking profits and just splashing it out on like, parties and holidays and houses and cars. And then realizing like, oh, hang on, I've got this like humongous tax bill that I haven't even taken into consideration and then just gone bankrupt. So you don't want that. So make sure you always take profits on the way up and also, always account for, what taxes you need to be paying as well.
Or move to Puerto Rico and you don't have to worry about it.
Or Puerto Rico.
Not financial advice.
Or Dubai.
Fair point. Depending on what type of sand you prefer.
Yeah.
So we've flirted around it. Like obviously legacy's top of mind for you. But like today, how do you define success and has that changed at all over time? I feel like it kind of has for you, given the stories you've shared.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like when I first started, investing, 11 years ago now, I think. 11 years. When I first started, investing, and when I first, as a student, made a little bit of money, for me, success was just not having to even, count the dollars that you're putting into your shopping basket. Like as a student, I'd pick up something from the shelf and I'd have to check the price and do a calculation. Like, do I have enough money for this? Right. And when I reached a certain level of like net worth, just being able to freely go into a supermarket or just freely being able to pay my bills without having to worry about, is this like the last, amount, like, dollars in my account? I would have to say like that for me was the closest thing to success at the time. Like I think it really was. It was just so satisfying to like not have that fear, that anxiety anymore, that the lack of like, or the potential lack of money could bring. But like I would say since then it's further developed. I really do love my friendship circle. I'm very incredibly grateful for my big friendship group base of people around me. They've always been incredibly supportive and and vice versa as well. I always love to uplift my friends, and I feel like when my friends are winning, I'm winning as well. And I just think also one last thing would just be health. I had a couple of health scares in the last couple of years. I had a blood clot in my leg, and I was just thinking you can make all the money in the world, and if you don't have health, you've got nothing, right? So just having a large friendship base and having a health is by far success in my books.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned health because that's something that I think is should be top of mind for a lot of people. I mean, I just crested 40, got 2 young kids, and it's something that's top of mind, right? Like in theory, I'm on the later half of my life, and it's no matter how much you make, you can never buy more time. It's a really
Exactly.
tough thing to wrap your head around.
And not even just like physical as well, but like mental, right? Like we live in this very high impact market. There's like very quick dopamine triggers on meme coins. A lot of people getting wrecked. A lot of people losing very significant amounts of money for them. It's stressful. I've already heard of a lot of like horror stories even in this bull market of people being too over leveraged or went too deep into a meme coin that they thought was going to be the next Bitcoin, right? So you just take care of yourself. Like get that sleep, eat healthy. Get those checkups. There's nothing. Meditate. There's nothing more than having your health.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Seeing that you're pretty open about your advanced degrees in school. I'm a big reader. Do you have any books, or what's one book you'd recommend for max value to the listeners?
I actually recently just got a new book, the $12 million Stuffed Shark. Have you heard of it? Yeah, so it's like explores the economy of psychology in the contemporary art market. Right
Yeah.
there you go.
Mine's not within reach, but Nifty beat me to it. Good job, buddy.
Mine's like almost within reach. I should have also pulled it out, but yeah, like I just picked it up. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm not going to spoil it, but I think there's a lot of parallels to even like the digital art market. Why are some collections or artists going up whereas others are not? Maybe some are stagnant, some are going down. Who's determining these levers? What's the market psychology behind it? I just think it's a great all-round book if you want to learn more about the art world, and I think there's a lot of like overlaps there with the digital world as well.
100%. I think for anybody who's serious about the art world should, and your investments in it, should definitely take a read. That's actually reminded me to potentially dust mine off. I was fortunate enough that it was recommended in the Proof Discord about a year ago as part of the global read, so it was very nice.
Yeah, I can't wait to finish it. I'm excited.
We kind of touched on this, but how do you filter for opportunities, and is there anything that our listeners can take away from it?
Yeah, look, like I think first and foremost, I look at the founders. I want to know like their backstory, who they are, how they had success in the past, what they've set out to do. Like, are they able to do it? Like what's their skill set? Do they have a strong network? Even like, who is likely to like get pulled into this? Is the service or the product project, does it have market fit? What are the tokenomics? Are they fair or are they structured to just enrich the founders? um, there's so many ways you can sort of like like look at this from like many different angles. But yeah, like tokenomics, market fit, founders, again, community. Like I think sometimes the community is really like overlooked. I think community is really important. That in most cases can like make or break a project. So I think being able to like nurture a strong community and like keep them engaged for over a long period of time while you're building, I think it's a very hard task to do. And yeah, like I just think that if you can find that these projects do check off like a lot of those things, it's typically a pretty good bet.
Yeah, one thing I've taken away from your advice, and it's been a reaffirmation, is be a student of the game, right? Like know the game you're playing in, and then be a student of it and put in the hard work, right? Like it's easy to see somebody, especially now, it's like late March, we're in meme coin season, people posting about their 100x's or whatever, but that's the exception, not the rule. And the way you grew it is admirable because it really is being a student of the game. So kudos to you. I will say, last question for me on the rapid fire, but like, what's the best advice you've received in the NFT space? And then do you have what would be your best piece of advice for the listeners?
Honestly, I need people sometimes to tell me to take profits. I think that's some of the best advice. We've seen it too often, especially after the 2021 hype, right? We were seeing multiple NFT collections over a 10 ETH floor, with very like little justification as well. Like some of these projects, which just you couldn't fathom why this was actually worth 10 ETH. So like I think yeah, just you need to know when to sell. Like not everything is going to forever moon. Not every project is going to be the next CryptoPunks. Not every project is going to be the next Doge or the next Bitcoin. You need to play these cycles right, and you need to have a price in mind where you're happy to sell at and stick to it. Don't get caught up in the hype. Don't get caught up in Twitter's craziness and euphoria and super cycles. Don't do it. Just have a price that you're happy to sell at and just get out. Because even I to a degree fell victim to a little bit of that from 2021. We've spoken a lot about my successes in the space, which there have been some with the glyphs and everything, but there's also been some big losses as well. Just recently my puck piece on Sotheby's, which was bought for 1.4, 1.6, it only got about $150,000. So maybe if I had sold that during the peak, I probably could have maybe got a lot more for that. But I failed to sell that too soon, and ultimately paid for that. But I also justified it into my mind because sometimes you just need to also just know when to cut, even if it isn't down, even if you are in a loss. Like me holding a puck piece that's worth 150K through a bull market right now, is that really going to be the best return on investment? Or is extracting that 150K and hopefully, let's say, 5xing that or 10xing that in a strong coin that has a great market structure with good fundamentals, community, team, or investing in that instead, and making that money back. That's how I always view it. Again, like going back to the Glyphs offer of 15 million, straight away I was like, that's a slap in the face. I would never accept 15 million, but then suddenly thinking, hang on, that's potentially 45 million just on a 3x, right? So you need to start thinking about it and like, what's that opportunity cost? And it's
Yeah, it's
sometimes it's
the
too
sunk
great.
cost fallacy, right? Like people are like, "Oh, it's going to come back. It's going to do this." Like, but
Just get out.
you're also losing opportunity in the process. That's very
Exactly.
wise.
Exactly. You're just don't sink with the ship. Just know when to cut and move on.
Yeah, the other thing is, Nifty and I are talking this off camera, but I have a saying of like failing to plan is the same thing as planning to fail, right?
Yeah,
So have your
exactly.
targets, execute against them diligently, and then, my philosophy is let some of it ride for like just in case. But when you're
Yeah.
looking at lifetime and generational wealth, it's important to be able to lean into it.
And that's the thing, like, you don't have to take everything out, right? Like you can take out 80%, 90%, leave 10% in. Like if it does end up doing a 20x run, fantastic. Like then you've still got some left over. But I think that's, it's great advice.
Well, we're coming up on time. I want to say thank you so much for the generosity. Is there any closing remarks you'd like to share with the listenership?
Yeah, look, I just think that, keep focused, in these frothy markets, take on some of that advice that we've spoken about today. I think there's definitely a lot of like, great opportunities in the market right now. Obviously, NFTs haven't gone the way that we would have hoped. But, in no world is digital art not significant, right? And I think there's a lot of great, valuable, investments that you could be potentially making right now in that space. So yeah, and also thank you, Nifty Jared, what you guys do for the space, and being able to like highlight collectors, I think is fantastic as well, just for people to be able to learn from and hopefully share in some of that success.
Well, thank you for being such a great collector and investor because you're giving us some great content. I will say for the listeners, follow Seedphrase on X or Twitter, whatever we're going to call it. It's at Seedphrase, literally SEEDPHRASE. Pretty straightforward. Follow the SquiggleDAO, like and retweet this content if you found it at all valuable, which has a ton of valuable, in my opinion. Join the SquiggleDAO Discord. There's an open section. You don't have to be a holder, but there's also an NFT if you want to gain access to the gated content. And if anything, Nifty and I are available by DM. So if you have any questions about Squiggles or the content, please feel free to engage. We appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the SquiggleDAO podcast, which has been brought to you by Nifty. Nifty is the pioneer of the entire NFT lending market. Their platform has the deepest liquidity, which usually means you can get the best terms. They also have no auto-liquidation risk. As long as you repay the loan before maturity, you get your asset back. Get more flexibility on your finances, take advantage of any opportunities, and make your NFTs work for you. Nifty has done over $500 million in total loan volume since launching in 2020 and has had over 60,000 loans with zero security incidents. Head to niftyfi.com and try lending today.
The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional or financial advice. The hosts and guests are not licensed financial advisors, accountants, or lawyers. The content is based on personal experiences, opinions, and research, and its accuracy, completeness, and timeliness cannot be guaranteed.